Could the innocent, quiet assistant who managed my life every single day truly be carrying my unborn children without telling me a single word? Before we dive into the story, please hit the subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment below to help our channel grow. Part 1. The Hidden Secret. The leather chair beneath me felt colder than usual as I stared blankly at the open file resting on my desk. For nearly half an hour, I had not turned a single page. The document in front of me was supposed to be one of the most critical contracts my company had secured this quarter, yet its contents were nothing more than blurred lines on paper. My focus was entirely elsewhere. It was locked onto the young Omega, sitting at his workstation, just across the glass partition of my private office. His name was Lucien. At 26, he was the quiet backbone of my daily routine, my dedicated personal assistant, and, unknown to anyone else in this building, the Omega who was currently carrying my twin pups. A soft, imperceptible smile pulled at the corner of my lips as I watched his slender fingers fly effortlessly across his keyboard. He was entirely immersed in his work, oblivious to the fact that I was watching his every move. He was just entering his 4th month of pregnancy, and despite his best efforts to wear oversized shirts and structured blazers, the slight, gentle curve beneath his clothes was becoming increasingly difficult to disguise. Most people walking through our executive floor would never notice it. They would assume he had simply gained a little weight, or that his clothes were slightly ill-fitting. But I noticed. I noticed every tiny change in his posture, every subtle shift in his breathing, and every time his hand unconsciously brushed against his midsection when he thought no one was looking. 5 years ago, when my business was nothing more than a wild dream operating out of a cramped, windowless room, Lucien had walked into my office. He carried nothing but a pristine resume, a modest bag, and a quiet sense of determination that immediately set him apart from every other applicant. He became my first true assistant. Over time, he became my most trusted employee, and eventually, the closest confidant I had ever known in my life. For 5 long years, he stood shoulder to shoulder with me as I built this enterprise from the ground up. He stayed through midnight deadlines, failed initial investments, impossible pressure from board members, and every monumental victory that followed. Somewhere along that arduous journey, my company grew into one of the largest corporate giants in the region. And somewhere along that same journey, Lucien became the one person in this world I trusted more than myself. Yet, despite our deep bond and the underlying warmth that had always existed between us, neither of us had ever dared to cross the boundary between professional loyalty and personal desire. We kept our relationship strictly defined by boundaries of respect and unspoken affection. At least, that was true until nearly 4 months ago. We had traveled abroad together for a high-stakes international business summit. The schedule was relentless, packed from dawn until midnight with back-to-back negotiations, investor dinners, and endless press interviews. In the chaotic rush of managing my demanding itinerary, Lucien had forgotten to remind me to take my monthly suppressants, and in the haze of sheer exhaustion, I had forgotten to take them myself. That single oversight triggered a sudden, severe, and completely unexpected alpha cycle while we were isolated in our hotel suite. Everything after that moment had been a blur of scorching heat and wild instincts. I remembered collapsing onto the carpet of the master bedroom, my internal senses screaming out in agony as the unsuppressed alpha heat tore through my veins. But amidst the overwhelming chaos, I vividly remembered the soothing presence that had suddenly engulfed me. Someone had wrapped me in the sweetest, most intoxicating Omega scent I had ever experienced, a heavenly mixture of warm vanilla and soft rain. I remembered gentle hands resting on my burning chest, a soft voice whispering calm reassurances into the dark, telling me that I was safe and that everything was going to be fine. For the first time in my life, my violent alpha cycle did not burn with agony. It settled into absolute peace. When I woke up the following morning, the suite was silent and entirely empty. The air was clear, leaving me to wonder if the entire night had merely been a vivid hallucination brought on by fever. Later that afternoon, while reviewing our return schedule, I had casually asked Lucien if he knew who had come into my room to assist me. He had simply looked up with a perfectly calm, somewhat confused expression, telling me that he was unsure, and that it had likely been a specialized hotel medical attendant dispatched by the concierge. I had wanted to believe him. I truly had. But that scent, that profound feeling of instinctual safety, refused to leave my mind. The moment we returned home, I discreetly instructed my chief of security to audit the hotel's internal surveillance logs from that night. 2 days later, the footage was delivered directly to my private computer. I watched the video once, then twice, then a third time, my chest tightening with every passing second. The Omega who had entered my room at midnight was not a hotel worker. It was not a stranger. It was Lucien. The shock had rendered me completely speechless. The person who had comforted my wild instincts, the person whose soothing scent had anchored my mind, was the very assistant who sat right outside my door every morning. I had closed the file and instructed my head of security to purge the records, making it absolute clear that no one else was ever to know about the footage. If Lucien was choosing to keep his actions hidden, if he was terrified of altering the balance between us, then I was determined to respect his silence until he felt safe enough to confide in me. Life had seemingly returned to a normal rhythm after that trip, or at least that was what Lucien believed. But then, almost a month ago, security brought another confidential update to my desk. An internal medical report from a private clinic had been cross-referenced during a routine insurance audit for executive staff. The document confirmed that Lucien was pregnant, and more surprisingly, that he was carrying twins. The timeline matched our trip abroad down to the exact week. In that moment, I did not feel shock or anger. All I felt was a profound, suffocating sense of protective fear. An Omega should never have to carry twins alone, struggling through early morning fatigue and bodily changes without their alphas sent to comfort them. Every cell in my body wanted to march across the hall, gather Lucien into my arms, scent him thoroughly, and swear that he and our unborn pups would never face a single hardship again. But I restrained myself. If he had chosen not to tell me, he had his reasons. Perhaps he feared losing his career. Perhaps he thought I would view the pregnancy as a burden. Whatever his fears were, I refused to force his hand before he was ready. Instead, I began taking care of him in secret. I quietly slashed his daily workload in half, fabricated executive excuses to cancel unnecessary off-site meetings, and ensured that high-end nutrient-dense meals were delivered to his desk every day. Whenever he looked even slightly fatigued, I personally ordered him to go home early. He undoubtedly believed all of these changes were mere coincidences or generous corporate perks. They were not. Rowan. Lucien's quiet voice suddenly broke through my deep thoughts, pulling me back to the present moment. I blinked, lifting my gaze from the untouched contract on my desk to find him standing right in front of me, holding a warm mug of tea. His bright eyes searched my face with a mixture of hesitation and gentle concern. End of Part 1. Part 2. Unspoken Concerns. I cleared my throat, forcing my features into a calm, composed expression as Lucien set the mug down gently on the edge of my desk. The warm aroma of herbal tea filled the space between us, but my focus remained entirely on the soft curve of his waist, hidden just beneath his dark waistcoat. "Is there something you need, Lucien?" I asked, keeping my voice smooth and low to prevent any trace of my inner turmoil from leaking through. Lucien hesitated for a beat, his slender fingers adjusting the cuffs of his white dress shirt. His amber eyes flickered toward the stack of untouched documents near my hand before returning to meet my gaze. "You've been staring at that single page for 20 minutes, Rowan. And you've been doing that a lot lately. You seem distracted." "Just reviewing financial projections," I offered smoothly, offering a brief, reassuring smile. "It requires a lot of thought." He didn't look entirely convinced, but he let out a quiet, accepting sigh and took a small step back. "Well, don't push yourself too hard. You canceled your afternoon conference with the regional directors, so your schedule is completely clear for the rest of the day." "I canceled it so you could rest," I thought to myself, though out loud I simply nodded. "Thank you. Make sure you don't stay past 4 o'clock today, Lucien." "That's an order." A faint flush of pink dusted his cheeks, and he lowered his head slightly. "I still have 3 sets of reports to compile for the quarterly review, sir. I can stay until 6. 4 o'clock, I interrupted, my alpha tone slipping out just enough to leave no room for argument, though softened with warmth. "The reports can wait until tomorrow." Your health and stamina are more important to this firm than a few spreadsheets. Lucien blinked in surprise, a tiny confused smile touching his lips. You've been saying things like that a lot recently. It's almost as if you think I'm made of glass. I just value my most important team member, I replied softly, watching as he uncomfortably shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I could see the subtle signs of physical exhaustion setting into the line of his shoulders, the faint dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could entirely hide. Thank you, Rowan, he whispered, his voice laced with a genuine sincerity that made my heart ache. I'll head back to my desk now. As he turned and walked back toward his workstation, I noticed the slight unsteadiness in his steps. He placed one hand subtly over the small swell of his abdomen, taking a slow, quiet breath as if fighting off a sudden wave of nausea or fatigue. Every protective instinct inside my alpha nature roared at me to stand up, sweep him into my arms, and carry him straight to a bed where he belonged. But I forced my hands to remain flat on the desk, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. I couldn't rush him. If I revealed that I knew about the twins now, before he was ready to trust me with his secret, he might panic and retreat entirely. So I waited, keeping my quiet guard over him from across the room. Nearly 2 weeks passed in that delicate balance. I continued to adjust his schedule, discreetly order nutritious lunches to his desk under the guise of catering samples, and drive him home whenever the weather was bad or his energy seemed low. But despite my efforts, carrying alpha twins was taking a tremendous toll on his omega body. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The office was quiet, as most of the senior executives were attending an off-site seminar. I was in the middle of reviewing a project proposal when I heard a soft sound outside my glass office, a quiet gasp followed by the clatter of dropped papers. I was out of my chair in an instant. I threw open the glass door to find Lucien leaning heavily against the side of his desk, his face drained of all color. His hand was pressed firmly against his stomach, his breathing short and shallow. The stack of client folders he had been carrying lay scattered across the floor at his feet. Lucien! I reached him in 2 long strides, catching his elbows just as his knees buckled slightly. The moment my hands touched him, his faint omega scent flared with sharp notes of distress and physical exhaustion. I'm fine, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper as he tried to pull back, though he lacked the strength to stand up straight. Just a little dizzy, it passed quickly. You are not fine, I said firmly, ignoring his weak protest as I slid one arm behind his back and the other beneath his knees, lifting him smoothly into my arms. Lucien gasped softly, his hands instinctively gripping the lapels of my suit jacket for balance. Rowan, put me down. Someone might see. There is no one here and I don't care if they do, I snapped gently, walking straight back into my private office and laying him down carefully on the leather sofa. I quickly grabbed the throw blanket from my armchair and draped it over his body, tucking it in around his shoulders. He lay there, pale and trembling slightly, his amber eyes wide with panic as he looked up at me. I just need a glass of water, Rowan. Please, you don't need to make a fuss. I can finish the workday. We are leaving right now, I said, my voice leaving absolute zero room for debate. I am taking you to the hospital. At the word hospital, real panic flashed across Lucien's face. He tried to sit up, his hand clutching the blanket tightly. No. No hospital. Please, Rowan, I don't need a doctor. I just need to sit here for 10 minutes, I swear. Lucien, you almost collapsed, I said, kneeling beside the couch so I was at eye level with him. I reached out, gently wiping a drop of cold sweat from his forehead. I am not taking any chances with your health. We are going. They'll run tests. They'll ask questions. His voice cracked, tears suddenly welling up in his eyes, threatening to spill over his pale cheeks. Please, Rowan. I'm begging you. Don't take me there. I just need to rest at home. Seeing him cry shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. The fierce, independent assistant who had managed corporate crises without blinking was trembling in front of me, terrified of the truth being exposed. Why are you so afraid of a doctor's examination? I asked very softly, keeping my gaze locked onto his. Lucien bit his lower lip, fresh tears escaping and trailing down into his collar. He closed his eyes tightly, taking a long, ragged breath that shook his entire frame. For several seconds, the only sound in the office was the steady patter of rain against the high windows. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with a profound sadness and defeat. He slowly slid one hand down beneath the blanket, resting it over the small, rounded curve of his stomach. "Because," he whispered, his voice trembling so hard it was barely audible. "Because if they examine me, they'll tell you." "Tell me what, Lucien?" I coaxed gently, though my heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. He swallowed hard, looking away from me toward the rain-streaked window. "They'll tell you that I'm 4 months pregnant, with twins." End of Part 2. Part 3. The Sanctuary. The quiet words hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile, echoing through the empty office alongside the steady rhythm of rain against the window. Lucien kept his face turned away, his shoulders trembling as soft, breathless sobs escaped him. He had finally let the truth out, but instead of relief, his entire body was rigid with fear. I remained kneeling beside the couch, my chest aching so sharply I could hardly draw air. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly as I gently cupped his cheek, turning his face back toward mine. "Lucien, look at me please," I whispered softly. He slowly opened his wet eyes, his long lashes soaked with tears. The absolute vulnerability in his amber gaze was almost unbearable to see. He looked like he was waiting for the ground to split open beneath him, waiting for rejection, anger, or disgust. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, keeping my voice as soothing and grounded as possible. "And I am not going to turn you away. But right now you are pale, you are trembling, and you almost fainted in my arms. You are carrying twins, Lucien. Your body is working twice as hard, and I am taking you to a private clinic right now. No press, no public records, no unwanted questions. Just a doctor to make sure you and the babies are safe." Lucien swallowed hard, searching my eyes for any trace of deceit. Finding only genuine warmth and steady concern, his defensive posture finally crumbled. He gave a faint, exhausted nod, letting his forehead rest briefly against my shoulder. "Okay," he whispered faintly. "Okay." Without another word, I wrapped the blanket around him, lifted him securely into my arms, and carried him out through my private executive elevator directly to the underground parking garage. I laid him carefully into the passenger seat of my car, adjusting the seat so he could recline comfortably, before driving straight to a private medical facility owned by a trusted family physician. The drive was silent, filled only with the quiet hum of the engine and Lucien's steady, shallow breathing. Every few minutes, I reached across the center console to take his small, cold hand in mine, squeezing it gently to remind him he wasn't alone. He didn't pull away. He held onto my fingers tightly, as if holding onto a lifeline. When we arrived at the clinic, Dr. Vance, a seasoned, highly discreet physician, was already waiting for us. Lucien was placed on a soft examination bed, hooked up to a gentle foredrip to restore his fluids, while a warm ultrasound gel was applied to his midsection. I stood right beside the bed, holding Lucien's hand as the doctor moved the transducer across the small, pale curve of his stomach. Lucien kept his eyes shut tight, terrified of looking at the monitor, his knuckles white in my grip. "Everything is stable," Dr. Vance announced smoothly, turning the screen slightly toward us. The fainting episode was caused by severe physical exhaustion, low blood pressure, and a lack of proper nutrition. Carrying twins requires immense energy from an omega's body. If you push yourself like this again, Lucien, you could put yourself and the pups in serious danger. Lucien opened his eyes, staring at the small monitor in disbelief. On the screen, 2 tiny, perfectly formed shapes were visible, their small heartbeats fluttering rapidly like the wings of a hummingbird. The sound of their heartbeats filled the quiet room, a double rhythm that made my own heart swell with overwhelming emotion. "They are healthy," the doctor continued, looking sternly at Lucien. "But you need immediate, total bed rest. Proper meals, regular supplements, and zero stress. You cannot continue working long hours in an office." Tears trickled down Lucien's temples into his hair as he stared at the screen. I understand, doctor. Thank you. An hour later, after the 4 was finished and Lucien was cleared to leave, I carried his medical prescriptions and led him back to my car. As I pulled out of the clinic's driveway, Lucien looked out the window, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. You can drop me off at my apartment, Rowan. I'll take a few days off. I'll manage. I didn't turn down the street that led to his modest apartment complex. Instead, I merged onto the main avenue heading straight toward the private residential district on the upper hills of the city. Lucien frowned slightly, turning his head to look at me. Rowan? This isn't the way to my place. You are not staying at your apartment alone, I said calmly, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead. Your building doesn't have an elevator, you'd have to walk up 3 flights of stairs, and there is no one there to cook for you or monitor your health. Rowan, please, I can't intrude on your life like this, Lucien protested softly, panic creeping back into his voice. I'm already causing you so much trouble. You've done more than enough. You are not intruding, I interrupted, my tone firm, yet full of unyielding gentle care. You are coming home with me, Lucien. To my penthouse. He stared at me in complete shock, his lips parted slightly. Your penthouse? Yes, I replied, turning the car into the gated driveway of my private estate building. You need bed rest, proper nutrition, and someone to take care of you 24 hours a day. I am not letting you go back to an empty apartment to suffer by yourself. But why? Lucien whispered, his voice cracking with emotion as he looked at me. Why are you doing all of this for me? I'm just your assistant, and these babies. He choked on his words, unable to finish the sentence. I stopped the car in the private garage beneath my building, turning off the engine. In the quiet darkness of the car, I turned to face him fully. You have stood by my side for 5 years, Lucien, I said softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of dark hair behind his ear. You are far more than just an assistant to me. You are the most important person in my life. And as long as you are under my care, neither you nor your babies will ever have to face another day alone. Lucien bit his lip, fresh tears filling his eyes, but he couldn't find the words to argue any further. I helped him out of the vehicle and guided him up the private elevator directly into my spacious, top-floor penthouse. The apartment was grand, quiet, and filled with soft, warm lighting. I led him straight into the master guest suite, a large, comfortable room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glowing city lights. This will be your room, I said, placing his small bag on the luggage rack and pulling back the heavy, soft duvet on the king-size bed. Get into something comfortable and get under the covers. I'll prepare something for you to eat. Rowan, you don't have to cook for me. I want to, I replied with a warm smile. Now rest. While Lucien changed into a set of my oversized soft cotton pajamas, I walked into the kitchen. I hadn't cooked a proper meal in years, but tonight I personally prepared a pot of rich chicken broth with fresh vegetables, steamed rice, and a side of iron-rich greens. Everything Dr. Vance had recommended for a pregnant Omega. When I carried the wooden tray back into the bedroom, I found Lucien sitting propped up against the plush pillows, looking tiny and delicate inside my large dark sweater. The faint scent of warm vanilla and rain was beginning to drift back into his skin, no longer choked by panic. Here, I said, setting the tray carefully across his lap. Eat as much as you can. Lucien looked down at the steaming bowl, the delicious aroma filling the room. He picked up the spoon with trembling hands and took a small sip. A look of quiet, overwhelming relief washed across his features, and he slowly ate half the bowl before setting the spoon down with an exhausted sigh. Thank you, Rowan, he whispered, his eyelids already growing heavy. It was really good. I'm glad, I said gently, taking the tray away and setting it on the bedside table. I helped him lie down properly, pulling the soft duvet up over his chest. As he sank into the plush mattress, his amber eyes remained fixed on me, clouded with sleepiness and an unspoken, deep emotion. Rowan? He called out softly just as I was about to turn off the main light. Yes, Lucien? Will you stay until I fall asleep? My heart gave a heavy, tender thud. I pulled up a comfortable armchair right beside his bed and sat down, reaching over to rest my hand lightly over his soft blanket. "I'll stay right here," I promised. Within minutes, Lucien's breathing slowed into a deep, peaceful rhythm. He was finally safe, finally resting. Sitting alone in the quiet dim light of the bedroom, I looked down at his serene face, then shifted my gaze to his stomach beneath the blanket. Slowly, carefully, I slid my hand beneath the edge of the duvet and rested my bare palm gently against the soft curve of his lower belly. The warmth radiating from his skin seeped into my palm. I leaned down close, whispering so softly that only the quiet room could hear. "Sleep well, little ones. Daddy is right here. I'll protect both of you and your papa, no matter what happens." End of Part 3. Part 4. The Growing Bond. The first few weeks of Lucien living in my penthouse transformed the quiet, empty space into a true sanctuary. My life shifted entirely. The multi-billion-dollar corporate empire that used to consume every second of my day faded into the background, replaced by a single, unwavering priority: ensuring Lucien rested, ate properly, and felt entirely protected. Every morning, I woke before dawn to prepare his breakfast. Dr. Vance had provided a detailed dietary plan rich in iron, protein, and essential vitamins necessary for carrying twins. I took pride in making sure every meal was fresh, hot, and brought to his bedside before he even opened his eyes. "Rowan, you really don't need to serve me in bed every single morning," Lucien said one sunny Tuesday, holding a bowl of warm oat porridge I had made. He looked up at me with a mixture of profound gratitude and lingering embarrassment, dressed in another one of my oversized navy sweaters that engulfed his small frame. "Doctor's orders," I replied smoothly, sitting on the edge of his mattress with a soft smile. "Strict bed rest means minimum exertion. Your only job right now is to stay comfortable and grow those little ones." A faint rosy blush spread across his cheeks, and he lowered his gaze to the bowl, taking a slow spoonful. "You've completely put your own work on hold for me. The board members must be furious." "Let them be furious," I said calmly, reaching out to gently smooth a stray lock of dark hair away from his forehead. "My executives are paid millions to manage daily operations. My place is right here." Lucien's breath hitched slightly at my touch, his amber eyes fluttering open to look directly into mine. For a fleeting second, the quiet space between us crackled with an unspoken tension, a sweet, overwhelming warmth that made my alpha instincts hum with contentment. Over the past month, as his physical stress eased, his natural omega scent had returned in full strength. The intoxicating aroma of soft vanilla and fresh rain subtle filled every corner of my penthouse, wrapping around my senses like a comforting blanket. As his pregnancy progressed into its 5th month, Lucien's body began to change rapidly. The small, barely noticeable bump was now a distinctly round, beautiful swell. Walking became slightly more taxing for him, his lower back frequently aching by the late afternoon, and his shoes felt tight due to mild swelling in his ankles. Every evening after dinner, I made it a ritual to sit with him on the grand living room sofa. I would elevate his feet on soft plush cushions and spend hours gently massaging his calves and ankles with lavender oil, easing the tension from his tired body. "Ah! Rowan, wait, that spot!" Lucien gasped softly one evening, leaning his head back against the sofa cushions, his eyes half closed in pure relief as my fingers worked through a tight muscle in his arch. "Does it hurt?" I asked instantly, pausing my movements. No, it feels incredible," he whispered, a soft, breathless sigh escaping his lips. "It's just, I've never had anyone look after me like this before. It feels surreal." My chest tightened with a heavy mixture of tenderness and anger at how isolated he must have felt before. "You deserve to be looked after, Lucien. You've spent 5 years taking care of me and my company. It's my turn to take care of you." He turned his head to look at me, his gaze softening into something deep and expressive. "It's different now, isn't it? We aren't just boss and assistant anymore." "No," I agreed softly, shifting my seat closer to him on the plush sofa. "We haven't been just that for a very long time." Lucien's breath caught in his throat. He slowly reached down, resting his hand over the rounded dome of his stomach. "They're growing so fast, Rowan. Sometimes, when it's quiet at night, I feel tiny flutters inside. like little butterfly wings. My heart pounded fiercely against my ribs. You can feel them moving? Lucien smiled. A genuine, radiant smile that lit up his entire face. Yes. Would you like to feel? The invitation took my breath away. May I? He nodded softly, taking my large, warm hand in his slender fingers and guiding it gently beneath his sweater, laying my bare palm flat against the center of his warm, taut bump. The heat radiating from his skin made my breath hitch. For several long, silent seconds, we stayed perfectly frozen, staring at each other in anticipation. Then, right beneath the center of my palm, I felt a tiny, distinct tap, a light, delicate movement from within. My eyes widened in absolute wonder. A second later, another tiny kick landed against the side of my hand. That's them, I whispered, my voice thick with sudden, unbidden emotion. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, as I looked from his stomach up to his glowing amber eyes. They're kicking. They know it's you, Lucien whispered softly, a tear escaping his own eye and tracing a shining path down his cheek. Every time you come near me, every time you speak, they quiet down and lean toward your hand. They recognize your presence, Rowan. He didn't realize how true those words were. He thought they were simply reacting to a warm, comforting presence, completely unaware that their instincts were recognizing their biological father, their alpha. Unable to hold back any longer, I leaned forward, bringing my forehead gently against his. I kept my hand resting firmly over our pups, feeling another soft kick against my palm. I won't let anything happen to any of you, I promised into the narrow space between our lips, my voice trembling with profound sincerity. I swear it on my life, Lucien. Lucien closed his eyes, leaning into my warmth, his small hand coming up to rest gently over my chest, right over my thumping heart. I believe you, Rowan. For the first time in my life. I feel safe. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's warmth as the city lights flickered peacefully outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. But late that night, after Lucien had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep in his room, a sudden phone call broke the quiet of the penthouse. I stepped out onto the private balcony, answering the encrypted line. Sir, my head of security, Jack, spoke in a low, serious tone. We have an issue. Someone has been running background checks on Mr. Lucien's medical records and financial accounts over the past 48 hours. Someone is actively looking for him. I tightened my grip on the balcony railing, my alpha instinct flaring with a cold, lethal anger. Who? I demanded coldly. An external party linked to his estranged family, and possibly another corporate faction, Jack reported smoothly. They are trying to track down where he has been staying. End of Part 4. Part 5, Unseen Shadows. A cold, razor-sharp silence settled over the balcony as the chilling autumn breeze blew past. My knuckles turned white against the metallic railing as Jack's words echoed in my mind. Someone was hunting for Lucien. Someone was attempting to pry into his confidential medical files, trying to track down the Omega, who was carrying my children. Block every avenue, I ordered, my voice dropping into a low, terrifying command that admitted no failure. Lock down his medical records under my highest security clearance. Erase any public trace linking him to my private penthouse. If anyone so much as searches his name in a corporate database, I want to know within seconds. Understood, sir, Jack replied firmly. I'll double the security detail around your residence and monitor all incoming digital queries. No one will get close to him. Make sure of it, I said, hanging up the phone. I stood in the cold dark for several long minutes, taking deep, steadying breaths to suppress the surging fury inside my chest. Lucien had spent months living in constant terror, terrified of losing his job, terrified of being vulnerable, and terrified of having his babies taken away from him. I had vowed to be his sanctuary. I would tear down anyone who dared to threaten the peace we had built. Turning back inside, I walked softly down the dimly lit hallway to his bedroom. Opening the door without a sound, I stepped inside and approached the side of his bed. Lucien was fast asleep, curled sideways with the duvet pulled up to his shoulders. One of his slender hands rested protectively over the soft, round curve of his stomach, his breathing quiet and steady. The sweet, calming scent of vanilla and gentle rain washed over me, instantly easing the harsh edge of my anger. I carefully knelt beside the mattress, reaching out to brush a dark strand of hair from his forehead. "No one will ever hurt you," I whispered into the quiet room. "I'll protect all three of you, no matter what it takes." As if sensing my voice, Lucien stirred slightly in his sleep. His lashes fluttered, and a small, peaceful sigh escaped his lips as he subconsciously leaned his cheek closer to my warm hand resting on the pillow. The sheer trust he displayed, even in his sleep, filled my heart with an aching warmth. By the time morning light flooded the living room, I had already reviewed 3 rounds of updated security protocols with Jack. When Lucien finally emerged from his room around 9 o'clock, rubbing his sleepy amber eyes while wearing one of my plush gray robes, I had a hot, fresh breakfast waiting on the kitchen island. "Good morning, Rowan," Lucien murmured softly, offering a faint, beautiful smile that made my chest swell. He walked over slowly, placing one hand behind his aching lower back to support his weight. "You're up early today. Did you sleep well?" "I slept fine," I lied smoothly, pulling out a comfortable cushioned chair for him. "Sit down." I made fresh berry pancakes, scrambled eggs, and warm almond milk. Lucien's eyes widened with delight as he sat down carefully. "You're going to spoil me so much that I won't know how to function on my own anymore." "Good," I replied with a quiet smile, pouring his milk. "That means you'll have to stay with me forever." Lucien paused, his fork hovering midair. He looked up at me, his amber eyes shimmering with a sudden depth of emotion that caught me off guard. The light humor in his expression melted into something far more intimate, far more vulnerable. "Would that really be so bad?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. My breath caught in my throat. The quiet kitchen felt suddenly electric, charged with every unspoken truth we had danced around for months. "No," I answered, stepping closer until I was standing right beside his chair. I reached down, gently lifting his chin with my index finger, so he had to look straight into my eyes. "It would be the best thing that ever happened to me." Lucien swallowed hard, his cheeks flushing a faint pink. He leaned slightly into my touch, his fingers tightening around the edge of the napkin in his lap. "Rowan, sometimes I feel like I'm living in a dream. 5 years ago, I thought you were completely out of reach. An alpha who lived in a world of high-powered corporate deals and luxury. And I was just the quiet assistant trying to keep up. I locked my feelings away because I thought I could never belong in your life." "You were never just an assistant to me, Lucien," I said earnestly, my voice thick with sincerity. "You were the only constant in my life. The only person who saw me for who I was, not just the CEO of a company." A tear slipped from his eye, shining in the morning sun. "And now, carrying these babies. I was so terrified you would despise me if you found out. I thought you would think I was taking advantage of you." "Despise you?" I shook my head, my heart breaking at the thought. Gently, I cupped both sides of his soft face, wiping the tear away with my thumb. "Lucien, these little ones are a blessing. And watching you carry them, seeing how strong and selfless you are every single day, it only made me fall deeper." Lucien gasped softly, his eyes widening at my words. Before he could speak, a sharp flutter moved beneath his robe. He placed a hand quickly over his midsection, letting out a soft, surprised laugh. "They're moving again," he whispered, looking up at me through wet lashes. "I think they heard you." I smiled, placing my palm right over his hand, feeling the distinct, energetic thumps of our twins kicking against his inner wall. They were active, healthy, and growing stronger every day. For the rest of the week, our days settled into a sweet, peaceful harmony. I worked from home, conducting executive meetings via video conference, while Lucien spent his afternoons resting on the terrace, reading books on twin parenting, or simply watching the sunset. However, the quiet harmony was shattered on Friday evening. Lucien was resting in the living room, while I was in my home office finishing a financial report. Suddenly, the private intercom near my desk chimed, a sharp, urgent signal from the front lobby security desk. I answered immediately. "What is it?" "Mr. Ashford, we have a situation," the head lobby guard reported in a tense tone. There is a man down here demanding to come up to your penthouse. He claims to be Mr. Lucien's biological father, and he has brought a team of legal representatives with him. My blood ran cold. The shadow had finally reached my doorstep. End of Part 5. Part 6. The Unwanted Past. The pen in my grip snapped in half, dark ink bleeding into the report on my desk. I didn't even feel it. An icy, suffocating fury took hold of my mind, settling deep into my marrow. "Sir?" The lobby guard's voice crackled through the intercom, tense and uncertain. "He's causing a scene in the main entrance. Should we call local law enforcement?" "No," I replied, my tone dropping into a dangerous, deadly register. "Hold him right there. Do not let him step foot into the private elevators. I am coming down." I disconnected the intercom and stood up immediately, taking a deep breath to compose my expression before stepping out into the hallway. The last thing I wanted was to panic Lucien. As I walked past the living room, I saw him resting comfortably on the plush sofa, a warm knitted blanket draped over his rounded belly, engrossed in a book about infant care. The soft afternoon light caught his dark hair, highlighting the peaceful, serene glow that had finally replaced his exhaustion. He looked up as he heard my footsteps, a gentle, welcoming smile gracing his lips. "Finished with your meeting, Rowan?" My heart squeezed with absolute fiercely protective instinct. I walked over, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss onto his temple. "Just taking care of a minor administrative issue downstairs, my love. Stay right here, all right? Don't get up." Lucien's amber eyes flickered with a faint curiosity, but he simply nodded, leaning into my touch. "Okay. Don't be too long." "I won't," I whispered softly. Leaving my penthouse, I took the private elevator directly down to the ground floor. The moment the brass doors slid open into the marble-paved lobby, the harsh, aggressive voice of an older man echoed through the grand space. "I know my son is up there," the man shouted at two armed security guards blocking the turnstiles. "I am his biological father. You have no legal right to hide an omega from his family, especially when he's carrying a high-value pregnancy. Call Rowan Ashford down this instant." I stepped into the lobby, my heavy leather dress shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. "You don't need to yell, Mr. Vance. I am right here." The lobby fell into an immediate, heavy silence. The older man turned around sharply. He was in his late 50s, dressed in a sharp but slightly outdated tailor-made suit, his features carrying a bitter, calculated edge. Beside him stood two corporate lawyers carrying leather briefcases. This was Marcus Vance, the man who had abandoned Lucien years ago after draining his mother's modest inheritance, only to resurface the moment he smelled profit or influence. Marcus sneered, taking a step forward before my security team blocked his path. "Ashford. So it's true. My quiet, useless son managed to climb his way into your private residence. I suppose I should congratulate him." "Choose your next words very carefully, Marcus," I said, stopping a few feet away from him, my arms crossed, radiating a crushing alpha aura that made the two lawyers behind him shift uncomfortably. "You are standing in my private building, harassing my staff. Tell me why I shouldn't have you thrown onto the street this very second." "I am here for my son," Marcus said, crossing his arms with smug confidence. "And more importantly, for the children he is carrying. Our family lineage has rights, Ashford." Lucien vanished from his apartment weeks ago, ignoring his family's calls. "We ran an investigation and discovered he's living under your roof, pregnant with twins. As his legal father, I have the right to oversee his medical care, his living arrangements, and ensure that his offspring are legally protected under our family name." A cold, bitter laugh escaped my chest. "Family name? You haven't spoken to Lucien in 7 years. You didn't care if he starved when he was put through university, and you certainly didn't care when he was working 18-hour days to build his own life. You don't care about Lucien. You heard a rumor that he was carrying my heirs, and you thought you could use him as leverage to secure a payout from my corporate firm." Marcus's face flushed a deep, ugly red as his illusion of control shattered. "It doesn't matter what you think. Legally, An unmarried omega without a declared alpha guardian remains under the legal jurisdiction of his biological father, in matters of family estate and medical power of attorney. Unless you step forward and claim those unborn children under a binding legal contract, I can pull him out of this building today. The two lawyers behind Marcus quickly pulled out a stack of legal documents, attempting to look imposing. Is that so? I murmured smoothly, taking a single step toward Marcus. The sheer pressure of my alpha presence expanded through the lobby, making Marcus's knees wobble slightly, his smug expression instantly replaced by a flash of genuine fear. "Let me educate you on how this works, Marcus," I whispered, my voice dripping with pure venom. "First, Lucien is 26 years old, a financially independent adult who signed a full severance of parental estate rights 3 years ago, a document my legal team personally drafted and archived. Second, if you so much as utter another threat toward my omega or my unborn sons, I will personally buy out every debt your failing firm owes, bankrupt you by midnight, and ensure you spend the rest of your natural life tied up in courtrooms." Marcus's breath hitched, his eyes widening in absolute horror as the realization hit him. He wasn't dealing with a careless corporate executive. He was dealing with an alpha who held unlimited resources and zero mercy for anyone threatening his family. "And third," I added, leaning in close so only he could hear my next words, "those twins belong to me. They carry my blood, my scent, and my absolute protection. If you ever come near Lucien again, I won't send lawyers. Do you understand me?" Marcus swallowed hard, his face completely drained of color. He took a staggering step back, trembling under the weight of my unyielding glare. Without another word, he turned on his heel and fled through the glass sliding doors, his two terrified lawyers scrambling right behind him. I stood in the center of the lobby, taking a slow, deep breath until my racing pulse gradually calmed down. I turned to my head lobby guard. "Increase the building's perimeter security. No unauthorized visitors on this block." "Understood, Mr. Ashford," the guard replied with deep respect. Taking the private elevator back up to the penthouse, I stepped out into the quiet hallway. I paused near the living room entrance, smoothing down my suit jacket and forcing a warm, relaxed expression onto my face. I would never let the filth of the outside world touch the sanctuary I had built for him. When I walked into the living room, Lucien was sitting up on the sofa, holding a warm cup of decaf tea. He looked at me, a soft, curious smile playing on his lips. "Everything taken care of?" he asked softly. I walked over, sitting down right beside him, and pulling him into a gentle, firm embrace. I buried my face in the side of his neck, inhaling the sweet, comforting scent of vanilla and fresh rain that immediately grounded my soul. "Yes, my love," I whispered, kissing his cheek as my hand rested over the active, energetic kicks of our twin boys beneath his sweater. "Everything is taken care of. No one is ever going to disrupt our peace again." End of Part 6. Part 7. Unbreakable Promises. The final months of Lucien's pregnancy transformed the penthouse into a completely enclosed world of soft light, quiet laughter, and profound, tender anticipation. As he reached his 7th month, the physical weight of carrying twin alpha pups became an overwhelming daily challenge for his slender frame. The energetic boys inside him grew bigger and stronger by the day, making simple movements like standing up, bending over, or even finding a comfortable sleeping position nearly impossible. His lower back throbbed with a persistent, dull ache, and his small feet swelled whenever he stood for more than a few minutes. Many nights I woke up at 2 or 3 in the morning to find Lucien sitting up in bed, cradling his enormous, beautifully rounded belly, taking slow, careful breaths to work through the discomfort. Seeing him endure so much physical strain broke my heart into 1,000 pieces every single time. "Rowan," Lucien murmured softly late one night, his voice thick with exhaustion as he leaned his head against my bare shoulder. I was sitting behind him on our bed, my arms wrapped securely around his chest, while my hands gently massaged the taut skin of his stomach with warm, scented oil. "They're kicking so hard tonight. I don't think they want to sleep at all." "Be gentle with your papa, little ones," I whispered smoothly, leaning over to kiss the warm skin behind his ear before resting my bare palm right where a tiny foot was pressing outward against his bump. "He's working so hard for both of you." As if responding directly to my voice, the sharp, chaotic kicks beneath my hand gradually smoothed out into soft, rhythmic flutters. The twin pups settled down, drawn to the deep, comforting vibrations of my alpha voice. Lucien let out a long, shuddering sigh of pure relief, his entire body relaxing back into my chest. "They always listen to you," he whispered, a tired, breathtakingly beautiful smile curving his lips. "The second you touch me, they completely calm down." "Because they know their father is right here," I replied softly, my heart swelling with an emotion so fierce and raw it made my throat tight. "And so am I." Lucien turned his head slightly, his dark amber eyes meeting mine in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. The lingering shadows of fear and uncertainty that had plagued him for months were completely gone, replaced by an absolute, unshakable trust. He reached up, his slender fingers tracing the line of my jaw before resting against my cheek. "I used to lie awake in my old apartment, terrified of this exact moment," Lucien whispered, his voice trembling slightly with genuine emotion. "I thought I would have to give birth alone in some quiet hospital room, hiding from the world, hiding from you. I thought having these babies would ruin my life, but you turned it into the most beautiful miracle I've ever known." "You built this miracle, Lucien," I said earnestly, leaning down until our foreheads rested together. "You fought through so much fear to protect our boys. I am just the lucky man who gets to spend the rest of his life loving all three of you." Fresh, quiet tears of happiness gathered in the corners of his eyes. "I love you, Rowan. Not because you took care of me, but because you loved our family before I even had the courage to claim it." "I love you too, Lucien," I whispered, closing the tiny distance between us to press my lips gently against his. The kiss was slow, sweet, and filled with 5 years of unspoken devotion, sealing every promise we had made to each other without words. When he reached his 8th month, Dr. Vance conducted a thorough at-home checkup. The results showed that while our twin boys were thriving, robust, and developing perfectly, Lucien's body was approaching its physical limit. "Carrying twin alpha pups places an immense strain on an omega's stamina," Dr. Vance explained gently as I helped Lucien sit up on the couch. "To prevent any sudden complications or sudden physical distress, I recommend scheduling an early, controlled delivery in 10 days. Both babies are fully matured and ready to enter the world safely." Lucien looked up at me, a brief flash of nervous anticipation in his eyes, but as I wrapped my large hand securely around his slender fingers, he nodded with absolute confidence. "We're ready, doctor," Lucien said softly, looking at me with a radiant, resolute smile. "We're ready to meet our sons." The night before the scheduled procedure, the penthouse was quiet and still. I had spent the afternoon double-checking the nursery room, the 2 carved wooden cribs, the tiny folded clothes, the soft blankets, and the dimming nightlights. Everything was immaculate. Everything was prepared for the new life we were about to begin. I stepped into our bedroom to find Lucien standing near the floor-to-ceiling glass window, looking out over the sparkling city lights. He was wearing one of my soft, oversized white linen shirts, his hands cradling the heavy, gorgeous curve of his stomach. I walked up quietly behind him, wrapping my arms gently around his waist and resting my chin on his shoulder. We looked at our reflection in the dark glass together, an alpha and his omega, bound together by love, trust, and the miraculous life growing between us. "Tomorrow morning, everything changes," Lucien whispered, resting his head back against my chest. "Tomorrow morning," I agreed, resting my hands over his, feeling the soft, faint flutters of our sons resting inside. Our family becomes complete. End of Part 7. Part 8. A New Beginning. The sterile, quiet hum of the private hospital suite was shattered by the sharp, ringing cry of a newborn. Seconds later, a second, equally demanding cry echoed through the operating room, filling the space with pure, unbridled life. Tears immediately overflowed my eyes, blurring my vision as I squeezed Lucien's pale, trembling hand tightly in mine. "They're here, my love," I choked out, my voice thick with overwhelmed emotion as I leaned down to press a desperate, tender kiss against his sweaty forehead. "Our sons are here. You did it, Lucien. You were incredible." Lucien let out a weak, breathless sob, his dark amber eyes shining with pure relief and radiant happiness. He looked exhausted, his body thoroughly spent after hours of labor, but his gaze never left the far corner of the room, where the pediatric medical team was carefully warming and wrapping our twin boys in soft flannel blankets. Are they healthy, Rowan?" Lucien whispered, his voice barely audible over his uneven breathing. "Two perfectly healthy, strong alpha boys," Dr. Vance announced with a warm, triumphant smile, stepping over to place the first swaddled bundle gently into my arms, while another nurse carefully settled the second bundle right onto Lucien's chest. The moment the tiny infant touched Lucien's warm skin, his energetic crying instantly turned into tiny, quiet snuffles. Lucien's hand trembled as he raised his fingers to gently brush against the baby's soft, dark hair, fresh tears streaming freely down his flushed cheeks. "Hello, sweet boy." Lucien wept softly, his whole frame shaking with pure, unadulterated love. "I'm your papa. You're finally safe in my arms." I knelt beside the high hospital bed, cradling our second son against my chest while resting my arm around Lucien's shoulders, bringing all four of us into a close, protective embrace. My heart beat with a fierce, boundless devotion I had never known existed. Looking down at the two tiny, perfectly formed faces, both carrying subtle traces of Lucien's soft features and my dark hair, every doubt, every fear, and every secret we had ever carried vanished into nothingness. 10 days later, we brought our newborn sons home to the penthouse. The quiet, expansive apartment was instantly filled with the sweet, delicate scents of milk, baby powder, and the overwhelming, heavenly blend of our family's combined scent. Life settled into a chaotic yet supremely fulfilling rhythm of late-night feedings, quiet lullabies, and peaceful afternoon naps on the wide terrace. One evening, after both boys had finally fallen into a deep, contented sleep in their matching cribs, I stepped into the dimly lit nursery to find Lucien standing near the window. He was dressed in a comfortable soft robe, looking peaceful, restored, and breathtakingly beautiful in the warm moonlight. I walked up quietly behind him, sliding my arms gently around his waist and pulling him back against my chest. Lucien let out a soft sigh of contentment, resting his head back against my shoulder as my hands rested over his waist. "What are you thinking about, my love?" I asked softly, resting my chin on his neck. Lucien smiled, looking down at his small, slender hands, then turning his head slightly to meet my gaze. "I was just thinking about how terrifying everything felt 4 months ago. I was so scared of losing my job, so scared of losing you, and so scared of trying to do this all by myself." He turned around in my arms, resting his palms flat against my chest over my steady, beating heart. His amber eyes burned with an intensity of love that made my breath catch. "I thought I was keeping a secret to protect my future," Lucien whispered softly, a brilliant, breathtaking smile spreading across his face. "I had no idea that my future was already waiting for me right here." "I loved you before the world ever knew about them, Lucien," I said earnestly, leaning down to capture his lips in a slow, deep, passionate kiss that carried every vow we had ever made. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you and our boys never doubt where you belong." "With you," Lucien whispered against my lips, wrapping his arms securely around my neck as the moonlight bathed our peaceful home. "Always with you." End of Part 8. And that brings us to the end of this emotional journey. Thank you so much for staying tuned and following Rowan and Lucien's story, all the way from fear and secrets to a warm, complete family. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more thrilling, heartfelt romance audiobooks like this, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, I'd love to read your thoughts. Drop a comment down below letting me know your favorite scene, or what kind of storyline you'd like to hear next. Your support means the world and helps this channel grow every single day. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you all in the next story.